Welcome to Podcast Answers, the show where I help you start and grow your podcast, answering any podcasting questions along the way. That's right. And this episode is the same. Yeah. What are we doing today? Well, that's a good question. Today we are going to be talking a little bit about what to do if you have a bad interview. That happens, and sometimes we can't help it. But that's we're going to talk about today is what happens if you have a bad interview. But first, I want to take some time to recognize a pioneer in our podcasting world, and just remember him. So I got news today that Todd Cochrane of Blubrry, the founder and CEO of Blubrry and Raw Voice, and a very early podcaster and a previous guest on this show, passed away yesterday on September 8th. So I just want to take a little bit of time to remember Todd. He was a great guy. He was cantankerous and would argue, but argue for the good of podcasting and open RSS. And Todd will be missed in the community, the podcasting community. And I'm just thankful for the time that I got to hang out with him just virtually. I've never met him in person, but again, he was a previous guest on this show, and I just wanted to take some time to remember Todd as we think about him. All right. Before we get into the content today, I wanted to talk a little. Thank Randy Black. Randy, after the last episode, put in some support for the show, and I appreciate that a lot. It really helps go a long way. So if you too want to do that, you can go to podcastanswers.com/buymeacoffee if you want to help support this show. So what are we talking about today? We are talking about what happens if you have a bad episode, not a bad episode, but a bad interview. So, are you required to publish it? Do you need to publish it? The quick and dirty answer is no, you don't. But there's a couple things that we need to take into consideration. So, those of us who like doing live shows, like I do, I have a live. I have a live element to my show. So if you didn't know, you can always, when we're recording, you can watch on YouTube. You can even join backstage by going to podcastanswers.com/backstage. That'll get you into a Zoom backstage room with me. But so if you do a live show, sometimes that gets interesting, because if you have let's say you do have a bad interview, and a bad interview may not be the person's fault. It just may be that it didn't go quite like you wanted it to go, right? You anticipated this show to be, this episode to be one thing. You anticipated it to be, go a certain direction. And when you get that guest on, it either doesn't go that direction, and it doesn't quite fit the topic or the episode idea that you wanted to have with your show. And so it could be that, it could be the fact that the person's just it's not going to edit down into a good episode. Because especially if you need to edit it and you need to pull out some things to make it a coherent thing, it just may not be on brand for your show. It could be a couple different things. So now taking that into consideration, what does that mean for you as a podcaster? Do you need to publish it? Because you don't want to ruin your brand, but you also don't want to hurt people. So there's a couple different things. So I would say always start out with this. When you have a guest, inform them like, hey, this may or may not be published. You can do that. I don't personally like doing that. I'll talk about a little bit what I would do later, but you could inform them, hey, like this episode is going to be published down the road, or, because I like to try and tell my guests, okay, this is going to be published on XYZ date, so they know when to expect it. But at the same time, what I would do is, if you were going live, so if you were doing live, I started to mention that earlier. If you're going live and you're recording your episodes live, that's a little bit different of a story, because that episode has gone out. Really, it has. It's not in the podcasting apps yet, but it has gone out because you're people may be watching live, like Randy Black is right now on our show. Randy, you're like a faithful listener. Every time I'm live, you tend to show up live. But if it's live, some of your people have already heard the episode. Like Randy has heard this episode before I've even published it out to anything because he's watching live. Now, if it is a bad episode and I decide not to publish it, I'm gonna have to go down and pull from YouTube and Facebook because I'm doing YouTube and Facebook now already, and so I'm already publishing essentially to the world. And so if this is a bad interview, what I would do is I would immediately, as soon as I'm done, I would go and I would pull down the YouTube video and I would pull down the Facebook video. Now, again, people may have seen it already. Those who are faithful and loyal to your show have seen it already. But again, does it matter? Maybe, maybe not. Now, if you're not going live like I do and you're just recording and then you're going to publish that episode later, it's a lot easier because you can then decide post interview, this just wasn't great. So now, do you have to, are you going to hurt your guests' feelings? Maybe. But what I would do is I would say to them, I would say, hey, listen, I'm just going to use Randy, your name is right here. So I'm going to use your name. I would say, Randy, this episode that we recorded just wasn't quite coming across like I wanted it. It didn't come across. I don't think it's going to represent you well. And I don't think it's going to represent the podcast well. And I don't want to do that to you. I don't want to have you not represented well. So I'm actually going to choose not to publish it. Now, what can you do if you do decide that you're not going to publish that episode? What I would do is I would go ahead and say, depending on the guest. Again, if you think that the guest, it just maybe that the episode didn't come out well, you can try and reschedule something again and kind of go with some little bit more guide rails on the episode. So let's say you wanted to make sure that the episode went down a certain path. I would let your guests know ahead of time and say, hey, look, this just didn't quite go down how I wanted it to go. So let's re-record that. And let's try to this is the topics that I want to touch on. Or you can just say, hey, like this wasn't great, but we're going to choose not to do it. Now, I think as a guest, I mean, I would appreciate that because I would know that, hey, the host is looking out for me. The host is really saying, hey, this isn't going to represent you very well. Because again, being on a podcast is a great, it's a great experience. It's good for you because it gets you the opportunity to get out there and be seen by people that are not in your sphere normally. And so for me, if I'm on a podcast and I'm just not representing very well my brand, my podcast answer brand, Layman Creations brand, or whatever I'm on the show for, if I'm not representing that well and the host doesn't feel like I represented that well, I do appreciate that then not being published because again, I don't want my brand to look bad. I don't want my podcast to look bad. So those are the things that I would do. Again, are you going to hurt your guests? Maybe, but is it in the long run something that is going to be okay? Now, what you can also do, and I've done before too, is I actually have a release form that is on my website that I send people to when they're guests, and I make them sign it because essentially what it does is it says, this is my, you're releasing your episode to me to publish as I choose essentially. And what I say with it in there is essentially like, this is mine. I can do with it what I want, but essentially you have rights too. So I try to be super general. Now, if one of my guests come back and say, hey, I didn't like that episode, that's a little bit more of a iffy thing. Like what, if he goes and listens to, or he or she goes and listens to the recorded episode, the published episode, and they don't like what you published in my release form, that releases me from having to do anything about that. Now, am I conscious of who the guest is? And if, depending who the guest is, I may pull it down. I may re-edit it, re-record, re-edit it so that way it hopefully is more to their liking. But at the same time, like, do I have to release it? No. Am I required to pull it down? No. My release form says I don't. It's mine. I can do with it what I want. you're releasing from that. Randy brings up a point here. He says, my release form includes a clause that says I may or may not release the recording, that the guest has the right to demand it, has no right to demand it be released. So essentially, that's releasing Randy from publishing something that he doesn't like. It's also releasing the guest from him releasing the guest from demanding to have to publish it if he decides he doesn't want to do it. So that's a great point. That's a great thing to do. If you've not looked into any podcast release forms, Gordon Firemark is a great, he's known as the podcast lawyer. And that's actually where I got the form that I use on my podcast for, because essentially he specifies in podcasting in law, and so he has some pre-approved forms that he has that just kind of help cover your bases. And so I would check that out if I were you. Maybe someday I'll actually get Gordon on the show to help out with that and talk a little bit about guests and the liability and things like that. But again, are you required to publish your episode if you don't like it? No. So the way that I think about that, again, going back to just kind of recapping here a little bit before I close up. If it was just me and I was recording, I would not, if it was a bad episode, I wouldn't release it. I wouldn't force myself to release it if it was a bad episode, if I felt like it didn't go the way I wanted to. No, sometimes do I stumble? Yeah. I mean, this morning, this episode here, I had some stuff as I started that was probably not exactly like I wanted to. In fact, I had go live before I actually wanted to go live. But I would not release an episode that I didn't feel 100% comfortable with. And that's the same thing with my guests. Am I required? No. If it's not, this is my product. This is my product. And if I don't want to release a product that doesn't feel good to me, doesn't feel like it went well, I'm in no way, shape, or form required to do that. So, guys, hopefully that helps. If you would like, I can help you with all sorts of things podcasting related, and I would love to chat with you. You can head on over to podcastanswers.com/contact, and that will get you over to my contact form. I help people start and grow their podcasts, like I've said before. And if you want to be a supporter of the show, I would love that. You can go over to podcastanswers.com/buymeacoffee if you want to buy a coffee and just help support the show in a little way. Each and every little amount helps, and it helps me to be able to keep producing this show. So, guys, have a safe week and keep podcasting.